A little background on our destination and allow you an opportunity to compare and contrast where I live and work and play with where you do the same in Slovakia. So you'll see there's some similarities and some contrasts. But in essence, what I want to do is describe the program that we created, and with the goal of within 5 to 6 years of going for certification as a sustainable destination. And that's what we were able to do this past March after 6 years. So that's a view of the Teton Range here in Jackson Hole. After giving some characterization of our natural and the human environment, I'd like to talk about our Sustainable Development Jackson Hole, our program, and how we engaged with stakeholders and how a vision statement played a particularly strong role in that engagement. And then I'd like to share some challenges and lessons learned along the way in these last 5 to 6 years. So Jackson Hole is technically Teton County, which is all of Jackson Hole in the southern half of Yellowstone National Park. And you can see some of the scenery in the summer and winter. Our geographic size, we're essentially 1.1 million hectares. 97% of our land is federal land. That's land that's in national parks, national forests, wildlife refuges, wild and scenic rivers that are protected. Also, another 1% is protected by conservation easements. So in essence, there's 2% of land that can be developed, and only about half of that has been so far. Our population year-round is essentially 23,500, but in the summertime, on any given night, which we're at the very end of our summer season, we're about 68 to 70,000 people. So you can see we more than double our population during the peak season. Our annual visitation in Yellowstone National Park's 4 million, Grand Teton National Park just slightly less than that per year. And then again, here's our federal lands in the years that they were established. Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872, and that began a movement within the United States for other national parks to be established, including the Grand Teton National Park. And you can see all the other federally designated lands that we have here that have different levels of protection and access. And for those who have been to Jackson Hole and Yellowstone, thank you for coming. We hope you come again. And for those you haven't, we're in the northwestern part of the United States. So a summary of our program here in Jackson Hole. These are 5 steps, general steps that we took for sustainable development in Jackson Hole to create our Jackson Hole and implement our Jackson Hole and Yellowstone Sustainable Destination Program. These steps we've been sharing with other communities that are also travel and tourism destinations as a model that they can pick and choose from. And it can be done in sequence, or they can be done with some overlap or in parallel as well. And I'm going to discuss each of these and how they were implemented. So our first step was to understand who we are in terms of sustainability assets. And so in 2012, we applied for and was accepted as one of the first 6 early adopters of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council's Sustainable Destination Criteria. Through that process, we were able not only to help the GSTC with maturing their destination criteria, but we also got for the first time from a third party a comprehensive assessment of how sustainable we were and were not. And in essence, we scored fairly high with environmental sustainability, given how much land that we have protected, a number of programs that we have here locally, and conservation organizations are working to continue that protection. We also scored fairly well with social sustainability, given that we have a lot of nonprofits here. In our little community of 23,500, we have over 200 nonprofits. And a number of those have a social mission. And then we scored very, very well in economic sustainability in 2008. when the housing crisis occurred. We were very slow to enter the recession that came from that and very quick to leave it. But where we scored very poorly and failed miserably is out of those, of that three-legged stool of environment, social, and economic, there's actually a fourth leg to that stool, and it's called destination management. And the GSTC found that although we have all these different programs and organizations and activities going on that are related to sustainability and sustainable tourism, we did not have an organization or a program that was working to coordinate and unite those programs toward common community goals and international standards for sustainability. So that was the beginning of the Jackson Hole and Yellowstone Sustainable Destination Program that I and my organization manage. In that process of being evaluated, we also had received an inventory, our first inventory of what kinds of plans and policies exist here that have to do with sustainability and sustainable tourism, what programs and projects, facilities, and services are involved. And that served as a baseline from which we could measure our progress in the years to come. And we did conduct further inventories later on in the process of building toward going for certification. And that was in 2014, 2019 that we did updates and expanding our first inventory of assets. In the process of creating the program, we felt that was vital to create a vision, articulate the vision well and often, to engage people, to create an awareness to people of not only what our program was about, but of the opportunities for our destination to improve. And we felt that if we could create a vision that could inspire people to want to get engaged, to inspire private and public sector funders to support sustainability and sustainable tourism, then that would be a very key step for us. So in 2013, when we were developing the program, we created a vision statement that said essentially that our destination, Jackson Hole, will be a world-leading sustainable community and destination. And no pun intended, but that sustainability is a journey, not a destination that you ever quite reach. And then we also, it's part of that vision, we felt that we needed to create goals and objectives and an action plan. And I'll talk a little bit later about our action plan. But what was very key was in 2017, after we had made some progress with implementing our action plan, we approached our local government, our town of Jackson and Teton County government, and asked that they be willing to pass a resolution establishing this vision formally and put it, if you will, into the record books for Jackson Hole to be a world-leading sustainable community destination. And in 2017, they did pass that resolution unanimously. All 10 elected officials passed it. And they also said that they'd support initiatives that would contribute toward this vision. So we created the vision. We engaged increasing number of stakeholders, and I'll talk about who those stakeholders are in a minute. And then we got our local government to support that vision after showing some progress that we made with our efforts. So early on in 2013, when we created the program, we wanted to bring on as many and as diverse stakeholders as possible. And the document, or the type of document or agreement that we created to do that, was a Memorandum of Understanding. Because so much of our land is managed by the federal government, they don't sign legally binding agreements with the private sector and with local government typically. So we felt a Memorandum of Understanding that, when signed, essentially would endorse and agree to participate in the Sustainable Destination Program would be important. And in 2013, we were able to do that. So within the first year, we had 57 signers. They all automatically became part of our strategic council. And as you can see, we had the national parks, which we had two. We had two national forests. We had the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that manages our national elk refuge. We had our state and local government, the state of Wyoming, and our local government as signers. We had many different businesses, and importantly, Some of the early signers that were private businesses were key influencers in our destination. Influencers in the sense that if other businesses saw that they signed on, they'd want to do so as well and engage in the program. And of course, we had many nonprofit organizations sign on, and we had schools also sign on, which is an important part of our program in bringing up the next generation of green leaders. So when we created the action plan, we created, in addition to the vision and goals, we had target areas and specific projects to work in those target areas, like training and technical assistance of businesses and other stakeholders. We formed partnerships, which are essentially the key for us to be able to move forward. As the GSTC said, we had many, many different activities going on in our destination that were working towards sustainability goals and in the sustainable tourism industry. But they were, for most part, working within their own silos by themselves. So we were very fragmented. So the key part of our program is not to replicate or compete with the private sector, but to support them in working together and to share what limited resources that perhaps they can't achieve their goals alone, but together, combined with those resources in partnerships, they could achieve those goals together. And we've seen a lot of that occur, which is very satisfying. So our action plan part, I'm going to talk a little bit about our action plan and how we engaged with our stakeholders. So a key target area was resident and visitor education engagement. And we had three essentially tools for doing that we continue to use. Our first is we created the Jackson Hole Sustainability Code of Conduct, and we worked with the schools with over 230 students to help create the content and the design of our sustainability code of conduct. As you can see, that's in the lower left of my slide there, where it says keep it whole. And that's a play on the words of Jackson Hole, but spelled differently. And we've used this and distributed to over 100,000 visitors so far who've come and seen our vacation planner, a holiday planner, as well as in the packets for those people who register for conferences. And it's a very concise, attractive, hopefully, way to convey a message about what not only are our ethics for sustainability, sustainable tourism, but what we expect our visitors to keep in mind. The second document is our sustainability report card. Our students helped us design that as well. They were very thrilled to actually give a report card to adults rather than receiving one themselves. And so that's meant to be an annual document updated with the latest data and trends on our progress toward becoming more sustainable and progress toward reaching the goals we've set for ourselves, as well as meeting the international standards for sustainable tourism. And then lastly, our Green Matters in Jackson Hole is a newsletter that we publish on a quarterly basis that has the latest information on issues, events, opportunities. And this is distributed to essentially around 8,000 people each time that we publish that document, that newsletter. Stakeholder training is essential. As I say, the three keys to working with stakeholders is training, training, and training. And we did that through group workshops, we did panel presentations, and we continue to do that. And even more so with a lot of virtual meetings with webinars. And you can see these are just some of the areas in the bullets here of what we included in our presentation. So we have had workshops on sustainability management planning, how to create a sustainability management plan, on energy efficiency and conservation, waste management and recycling, foods, and then also alternative fuels and transportation as well. And these logos here are examples of some, but not all, of our partners that provided instructors for our workshops and our trainings. We also provide technical assistance to businesses, one-on-one technical assistance. And we have two programs that essentially do that. One we call the Reduce, Recycle, Reuse Business Leaders, and it's more than just waste management, covers many of the other areas of sustainability and sustainable tourism. And when I say sustainable tourism, a key piece of that is ecotourism, is the environmental piece of that, by the way. You see the logo there. It's a survey that businesses take with the assistance of a member of my team, and through essentially an hour-and-a-half meeting, the survey is taken. They learn about new opportunities for getting resources to help them with their sustainability initiatives and actions. They learn about different ideas they can implement to become more sustainable, including how to convey the work that they're doing to their customers, to their visitors and guests as well. The key part of sustainability, of course, is not just doing good work internally, but also being able to communicate that to other people, especially to your customers and your guests. And then for those businesses that want to go beyond that initial introduction level for sustainability technical assistance, we have the Business Emerald Sustainability Tier, the best program for those businesses. And it's an actual certification program that involves on the front end consulting by one of my team members. And then I typically am the one who does the actual auditing and assessment for certification of our businesses. And the standard that we created, the best standard, I would say, is equal to most standards around the world for accommodations, tour operators, and other kinds of businesses. So both of those are meant to provide technical assistance. We have promotional benefits for those who, if you will, pass the test in both of those programs. And then they can use that to promote themselves as well. Now, at the destination level, not at the individual business level, but the destination level, we set a goal for ourselves when we began our program in 2013, 14, that within 5 to 6 years, we would go for certification. And so those projects that I mentioned before were helping us to improve upon what the Global Sustainable Tourism Council evaluated us on in 2012. And so we applied for a number of different awards and recognition along the way to certification. And the purpose of that was multiple purposes. It was not only to provide some recognition for all the work that so many people and businesses and organizations were doing here and giving them encouragement, but it was also, we used these forms of recognition to leverage further awareness and education in our community among the general public, the residents, our citizens, of the work that not only my organization was doing, but many, many other organizations that we are working with and coordinating were doing as well. And so you can see we had the Green Destinations. We were Green Destinations Top 100 destination for the first 3 years they ran the program. They told us we couldn't do that anymore unless we actually went for certification with them. National Geographic, we applied for, and we're one of the 3 finalists for Destination Leadership in the World Legacy Awards in 2017. And similarly, in 2018, with the World Travel and Tourism Council, we're one of the 3 finalists for Destination Leadership in that as well. And those helped get a lot of publicity through our local media and elsewhere about the work we're doing. And we leveraged that media to further engage and increase the participation of our citizens as well as our stakeholders in our program. And then lastly, we went for certification with EarthCheck out of Brisbane, Australia. And they audited us in September of last year, so a year ago. And then we received our formal notification in March of this year that we received certification. That is not something that we wanted to do at the beginning. There was no way we were going to be certified when we first started the program, but we felt that articulating that as a goal would really bring together, inspire, and improve the work that we were doing in our partnerships. And that worked very, very well to have that goal as well as our vision for Jackson Hole to be a world-leading sustainable community and destination. So where are we now? We're continuing to develop sustainability policy and a tourism management plan. Right now, we do have the town of Jackson has officially signed an overarching general policy for sustainability, and our local county commissioners, our other part of our local government, are in the process of reviewing it, and hopefully will unanimously approve that as well. We have many, many different policies with regards to or related to sustainability and sustainable tourism, but they're very distributed and fragmented across many different organizations at the federal government level, at the state level, at the local level, as well as among the private sector. And our job has been to bring those policies together into one integrated, centralized set of policies. And that is what we plan to have the county sign off on, as well as the town. And then the tourism management plan, again, would bring together not only all the policies, but all the goals and objectives and actions that we need to be doing together, not just as individual stakeholders, to work toward becoming more and more sustainable and maintaining our EarthCheck certification. So we hope to have that tourism or destination management plan completed in probably the latter half of next year. It was going to occur this year, but for obvious reasons, a lot of things changed. So what lessons have we learned along the way? I'd just like to share this and then be open for questions and discussion. I mentioned before, establish a vision early that all your stakeholders are embraced, or as many as possible embrace, and really are inspired by. So it needs to be something very simple and concise, but inspirational. And communicate that regularly, often, early and often. To your community, to your destination, your collection of destinations around the country. So for instance, to be a world-leading sustainable community or ecotourism destination, consider initiating an event or set of events that can create momentum for stakeholders and the general public to engage in. What kind of events could you create that a lot of partnerships could form to support that event, and then continue those partnerships beyond those initiating events? Destination management takes a lot of work. It's not something you can do from the top down, but needs to be done from the bottom up as well. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of relationship building that needs to occur, a lot of trust building that needs to occur as well. So a lot of one-on-one meetings, a lot of group meetings. I have drunk a lot of coffee over many one-on-one meetings with stakeholders to educate them and bring them on board to the program and to work with other stakeholders. Communications are vital. Typically what I see across many destinations is that communications are really under-resourced. Do not underfund the communications that need to occur to regularly keep in people's mind and change the culture from one of business as usual to progressing toward a future vision for sustainable tourism and ecotourism. And as I said, well, in this case, educate, and train. Don't stop that process. Once you begin, you can't stop. You need to continue that. And then really, maybe obviously, diversify your funding streams. For us, we had federal government money, we had local government grants, we got grants from national private foundations, and we actually had many business sponsorships and contributions as well. And then, although we had some initial help from outside consultants, we very quickly built capacity to do the work ourselves here locally. So we would not rely on outside consultants to do the work. And that's probably not music to the ears of those of you who do consulting, but I think it's very key that if a destination, whether it's a country, whether it's a town or a specific place, is going to work towards sustainability, that part of sustainability is being able to have your own capacity and capability to do the work yourself. And then again, building and sustaining collaborative partnerships. Once you start that process, you can't stop, and communications is vital for that. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. And Tomas and Diana, if there's discussion or questions, I'd be glad to hear them and help. Diana, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hope you
Great.
can hear me at the moment. Thank you, Tim, for
Yes.
your presentation. At the moment, I can't see any direct questions for you. Let's give a short period of time to the audience, please. Anybody, if you would like to ask something, please write your question.
And while that hopefully is occurring, I'd like just to re-emphasize how important building relationships and trust are. It's something that we all as human beings need to do in our own private and professional lives, and that's absolutely essential to take the time to do that early on, because if trust does not occur early on, it's very difficult to gain that once it's been lost. And so that's where communications and a lot of personal attention to stakeholders, key influencers are really necessary. Okay, I see there's a question Petra wants to ask.
Yes.
Oh, how big is our destination management team? So in addition to myself, I have 7 team members. They're actually all contractors. They're not employees of my organization because they all do work or have their own businesses in some cases. And they have a diversity of skill sets as well. So, but by and large, they've all gone through our training to be sure that we're working from a common frame of reference and a common set of knowledge and understanding. So it's 7. And probably a question maybe that's related to that, not only for Petra, but everyone else's question is, how much funding do we have? Well, it's an interesting partnership that we have. Our funding is only around $100,000 annually with the Riverwind Foundation. But because we work with 14 key partners, they have their own budgets that probably total roughly around $2 to $2.5 million. We leverage our partners and their budgets with the money that we have to apply toward our program. So it meets not only our program, but also supports their programs as well, which are interrelated. So we've been able to do a lot with a relatively small amount of money. And then Petra is asking, do you somehow measure the benefits that this journey towards sustainability brought you? That's an interesting question because it's difficult to measure the impacts on environmental integrity, measure the impacts on protecting the culture and the local community here. We do have metrics that help us do that. Our performance measures are more along the lines of the EarthCheck criteria for sustainable destinations, as well as the metrics that we've created on our own to help us measure our progress toward goals like being a net zero carbon emissions by 2030, or having 60% diversion rate of our waste away from the landfill by 2030. So we have goals like that. We have metrics to help measure that. And our program helps us measure our progress toward those goals, as well as toward the standards that EarthCheck has created that we have been certified against. So, but it is difficult to measure how well are we doing in protecting our natural environment. You know, how well are we protecting our community character? It's much more subjective. And then Diana's asking, how do we assure implementation respect of the code of conduct? Well, that's a good question as well. So what we are able to measure is how many of them get distributed and to whom. And we have our local Chamber of Commerce that helps us with tracking how many visitors receive that through their organization. We have help from our other local NGOs, local nonprofits that distribute the code of conduct and the registration packets for people that come here for conferences as well. And we do surveys, mostly of our local stakeholders, of who they're sending or providing the code of conduct to, and more subjectively, what they think about how receptive their guests, say for accommodations, have been in receiving the code of conduct. And if we get any comments back through their surveys that they do at their own hotels on our code of conduct, then we ask to receive those as well. But in essence, again, it's very difficult to measure how much people integrate the guidance, the content that we communicate through the code of conduct into their behaviors here, as well as when they go home. Of course, our hope is, since we have upwards of 4 million visitors a year, that a fraction of those will take their code of conducts home and share them with their own local government, their own destination management and marketing organizations. And then did some of our policies stop us on our way, on our sustainability journey, or did you find a way to bypass or work with them? I would say there were no policies that gave us difficulty, and that is that our destination marketing organization has been a consistent source of funding, but they are very strict in what money they allocate and who they allocate it to. It has to have some relevancy to marketing. So we had to show that every step along the way that we were working for destination management and developing sustainability and sustainable tourism here, we had to show how that provided some benefit to marketing. So we had to work within their policy to receive funding, but as I said, we were able to successfully do that since we receive funding from that destination marketing organization every year. But Stanislava, that's the only challenge that we did have with policies that might have slowed us down. Let's see. Have people run out of questions, or people, have you left their desktops for a drink?
There is a few more questions. You can yes, find them directly in the chat from Mary. Maria
has asked a number of questions here. Would you do something differently now than at the beginning? It's a good question. I think one of the lessons that we learned very early on, Maria, was that we were under-resourcing our communications. I had mentioned that in our lessons learned. I think we probably should have had triple the budget among ourselves and our partners than what we did have to do outreach to our community, to our stakeholders. And I think that not only would have helped with strengthening the diversity and the number of stakeholders that were engaged, but I think that also would have helped with our funding as well. We did struggle early on with funding because we were at the very beginning of the education process with our funders. But so I think that would be something that we would have done differently at the beginning if we could have. What was the biggest challenge that we faced so far? It's the same thing, and it's a horse that once you get on, you cannot get off. Once you start communications, whether it's with social media and other means, you can't stop, because if you start with communications early and often, people expect that to continue. And so that has continued to be our biggest challenge, is keeping the awareness in the people's minds that this is a program that's going on that's supporting them, not just certain stakeholders in the tourism industry. And that we're all working together to help protect a few of the very reasons why we live here and why people come here. It's our wildlife, our scenery, our recreational opportunities. All those would not occur without the support of the public, and the support of the public would not come without their education and awareness, if you will, their sustainability literacy. What new activities do we plan for the future? As I mentioned, is creating our destination management plan. We have in distributed form different plans. Our work right now, which is actually beginning in next month, is to start working with the different stakeholders, bring the policies and plans that exist now together into one centralized place and document. We expect that to take about 12 months. And do we measure social impact of our activities, for example? Only to the extent that that addresses the EarthCheck criteria and the goals that we set for ourselves for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community. But it's a very subjective and difficult impact to measure, is the improvement of people's welfare here in Jackson Hole, whether it's with housing security or food security, both of which can be challenges here because of the cost of living. But yeah. Hopefully that answers your questions, Maria. Let's see. Anything else?
I have one more question for you.
Yes.
There is the question what to do or how to practically involve the skeptic thinking people, or the people that are not cooperative at all, or defense of the activities of the sustainable development.
So whoever asked the question, are you saying that you actually have skeptical people there too? So
this is the question which we
it
are,
is.
which is important for Slovak conditions. This at the moment we have different areas, national parks, which are trying to have more protected areas, and there is also local people that they are working in forests, and they may somehow lose their jobs, and they are quite angry and don't too much participating at the process. So can you help us how to deal with this?
Well, so here are my thoughts based on some experience as well. Is if you think of all the people and types of people in belief systems and employment in, say, Slovakia or United States, there's going to be about 20% that you're not going to be able to convince. And there's 20% that are automatically convinced and are supportive. And so we tend to work with the other 60% of the people who are in the middle that haven't decided whether they like this or not. So we'd love to bring some of the 20%, if you will, that just don't support the work that we're doing to support it. But the amount of time and resources it would take to work with those people, and some of them are stakeholders in the tourism industry, would take away from the ones that we really do need to work with and we'll make progress with. So it's sort of a realistic situation. There's some concern that further protections of the land that we do have a lot of land, as I said, that has some level of protection to it. But if they can see employment opportunities, so for instance, I worked with a Native American reservation in Montana, and they were concerned that more and more of the land that was not just on the reservation but nearby was going to be set aside in a conservation easement. In other words, would be protected. But when we were able to show that this would provide an economic benefit to those Native American ranchers, then because we would not stop their access would be more monitored, but also a number of the people in their community would become guides, the tour guides that would be used for that area, because they were the traditional knowledge keepers for the wildlife and the lands there. So we were able to show economic benefit and get the support of the leadership in that reservation. So I think an economic benefit needs to be demonstrated to not just businesses, but to everybody. And there's a lot of research and surveys that have occurred out there, for instance, that are brought together by the Center for Responsible Travel with their trends in sustainable tourism that show conclusively, quantitatively, that protecting something does provide, especially in the long term, but also in the short term, economic benefit to the people that are associated with that land and the wildlife that are involved. So I think a key piece, and I didn't mention this in my presentation, is from the very beginning, the communications and working with stakeholders, be able to show what the economic benefit is of your program. If you can't do that, it's going to be very difficult to convince people that the work you're doing, whether it's to protect additional lands that you want to be able to bring visitors to, it would be very difficult to pass legislation to protect that land or to bring people on board to support the initiatives. So those are two thoughts. I don't have insight into the particular challenge in Slovakia or any of the destinations within Slovakia that maybe can be more applicable, but hopefully that can rhyme true with some of the things that you've experienced there. And then Petra is asking, do I notice any change in the number of visitors, economic value they bring to the region? I would say not yet, because we're actually quite on the verge of doing the surveys that would tell us specifically what kind of orientation the visitors had in relationship they had to our destination, Jackson Hole and Yellowstone. We were going to do surveys to find out what their values and interests were in terms of conservation, in terms of our local community and culture, also to find out more about how long they were staying, what kinds of activities they're involved in, basically establishing not just their length of stay and what they were involved in, but the economic value of their stay. And then the pandemic hit. We were actually beginning those surveys about in June, and we closed here in March, and we opened technically toward the end of May, but we have not begun those surveys yet. We intend to in next year, which will be very important information for our destination management plan. So, I mean, I'm actually, I should say one other thing in response to Petra's question, and that is that, interestingly, our visitation is pretty much the same as it was last year here. It depends on which part of the summer. Early on, we're about 20% less than what June normally brings in visitors here, but in July and August, it's been equal to what we had in 2019. And the reason is because we have, given the size of our country, a very large drive market. People from essentially 48 states, if not all 50 states in the United States, have come to Jackson Hole in the last 3 months for their vacations. And so we really have had not that big of a change in visitors due to the pandemic. Our challenge has been is how do we manage them in a way that does not increase the spread of the coronavirus here. And we do have some challenges.
Ďakujem pekne tým za tvoju prezentáciu aj za všetky odpovede.